I've always been the type to give people the benefit of the doubt. Suspicion just wasn't in my nature. Ella and I had been together for 5 solid years, 3 of those married. Life felt steady, comfortable even, at least that's what I thought. Ella worked in marketing, and I had a decent thing going as a financial consultant. We weren't swimming in money, but we managed. We'd go out for a nice dinner now and then, take a vacation here and there, and spend lazy Sundays binging shows together. Nothing flashy, just life as usual. But then, a few months back, things started to shift. At first, it was subtle. The sort of thing you notice but brush off because nobody wants to turn into a suspicious, paranoid guy. She started staying late at work more often, claiming her team would fall apart without her there to guide them. Fine, fair enough. Work is work, right? But it was her whole attitude when she came home that began to put me on edge. The Ella I knew would usually flop down on the couch, looking drained, eager to tell me every frustrating detail of her day. Now, she barely said a word, just a quick peck on the lips, almost like she was ticking a box, before heading straight to her phone or disappearing into the shower. It was like she was itching to escape the moment she walked in the door. And her phone, well, that's where things got even weirder. These days, everybody keeps their phone close, I get it. But Ella suddenly guarded hers like it was a top-secret document. She used to leave it lying around without a second thought. Now, it was always face down or tucked away in her bag. If it so much as buzzed when I was nearby, she'd grab it before I could even blink, like she was protecting some kind of state secret. Then there were the excuses. Every time I tried to ask what was up, she'd snap back, all defensive, like I was the one crossing a line. One evening, I suggested we go out for dinner, just the 2 of us. It had been a while since we had some time to ourselves, and I wanted her to know that I missed her. But before I could even finish the thought, she shut it down. "I can't, babe," she said. Tying her hair up in that casual way she used to do that always got my heart racing. "There's an urgent meeting tonight." Marcus dragged things out again. "You know how he is." She let out a little laugh, but it felt hollow, like she was putting on a show. Then she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and was out the door before I could even respond. I stood there, staring after her, wondering just who this Marcus really was. She'd mentioned him in passing before, some guy on her team, supposedly no big deal. But the way she said his name this time made my stomach twist. Still, I didn't want to go full-on paranoid. I had no proof of anything, so I decided to let it go. Then, just a few days later, Tessa, the neighbor from across the hall, showed up at my door. Tessa, the neighbor from across the hall, is one of those people who always seems to know everyone's business, even if no one asks. "Hey, Ethan, got a minute?" she called out with that familiar, nosy grin of hers. "Sure," I said, leaning against the doorframe, bracing myself for whatever gossip she had in store this time. Subtlety isn't exactly her strong suit. "So, I was out with some friends last night," she began, her voice dropping into that conspiratorial whisper she uses when she's about to spill something juicy. "And I think I saw Ella. She was at that new Italian spot downtown. You know, La Sorella." I frowned. Ella had told me she'd be working late. Tessa gave me a look that said she wasn't buying that story. "Well," she continued, "she wasn't alone. There was a guy with her, tall, dark hair, kind of handsome. They looked pretty close." She shrugged, like she was tossing out a casual observation. But there was enough there to plant a gnawing seed of doubt. I tried to brush it off, but her words clung to me the rest of the day, weighing on me. That evening, I watched Ella a little more closely. I noticed how she avoided eye contact when I casually asked how work had gone. "Oh, the usual," she muttered, her focus glued to her phone as if I wasn't even in the room. I wanted to ask her directly, but what was I supposed to say? That Tessa claimed to have seen her with some guy? It didn't feel like enough to go on. Still, I needed something concrete, and as it turned out, that proof came sooner than I expected. One evening, Ella left her phone on the kitchen counter and went upstairs to shower. Normally, I'd never even consider going through her things. But something snapped in me. Maybe it was her strange attitude lately. Maybe it was Tessa's story. Or maybe I was just done feeling like I was in the dark. I picked up her phone. my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I didn't even know what I was looking for, just some kind of answer to why everything felt so off. And then, right there was a message from Marcus, sitting at the top of her notifications. "You looked amazing. Can't wait for Friday." It was like a punch to the gut. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, hoping I was misreading, hoping there was some innocent reason for it. But deep down I already knew. Against my better judgment, I opened her photo gallery. Scrolling through, I found pictures of her with Marcus at what looked like a work event. They weren't just casual snapshots either. They were standing close, arms around each other, smiling in a way that turned my stomach. She was wearing that red dress, the one she knew I loved, the one she hadn't worn for me in months. And the worst part? This was an event I hadn't even been invited to. She told me it was just a team event. No big deal. Nothing I'd enjoy anyway. Yet there she was in those photos, holding on to Marcus like he was the only thing that mattered to her. I locked the phone and set it back on the counter just as I heard the water shut off upstairs. My mind was a storm. Anger, hurt, disbelief, all swirling together in a messy, toxic mix. I wanted to shout, to confront her right then and there, but I held back. I needed a moment to process it, to think about what I was going to do. When she came downstairs wrapped in a towel, she gave me a quick, casual smile. "What do you want to do for dinner?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could see was that woman from the photos, the one who had lied to my face, who betrayed me without even a second thought. "Not hungry," I muttered, brushing past her and heading to the living room. She didn't even ask if something was wrong, didn't notice a thing. And that was the moment I knew the Ella I'd married, the woman I'd built a life with, was gone. In her place was someone else entirely, someone who could look me in the eye and lie as easily as breathing. But I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. Not until I figured out exactly what I was going to do about all of this. Because one thing was certain, I couldn't just let this go. Those pictures had shattered everything I thought I knew. My heart wasn't just broken. It was crushed, obliterated. Like someone had swung a sledgehammer at everything I'd trusted. I stumbled into the bathroom, locked the door, and sank down onto the cold tile floor. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep them still. My chest was tight like I couldn't get enough air. It wasn't only the betrayal itself. It was the way she lied so easily. She had come home from him, from Marcus, acting like nothing had happened, like our marriage was still intact and everything was fine. She trashed our life together for a fling with some guy she'd insisted was just a friend. I slammed my fist against the floor, letting the sting of pain ground me, if only for a moment. I stared at the wall, my mind racing. The worst part wasn't even those pictures. It was her. How distant she'd become, how cold and indifferent. For months, I'd felt her slipping away, and every time I tried to reach out, hoping to bring her back, she only drifted further. I convinced myself it was a rough patch, that it was work stress or some phase we'd get through. But now I knew the truth. She wasn't just slipping away. She was running straight into Marcus's arms, and I'd been too blind, too trusting, to see it. I could hear her moving around outside the bathroom, probably getting ready for bed like it was any other night, like nothing was wrong. My blood boiled at the thought. How could she lie straight to my face, crawl into our bed, and sleep next to me like nothing was wrong? I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. She didn't know that I'd found out. Not yet. And that secrecy was the only edge I had. The next day, I reached out to my old friend Dylan. We'd known each other since we were kids, one of the only people I trusted completely. I shot him a text asking if he had time for drinks, and within an hour we were at a dimly lit dive bar downtown. Dylan gave me a hard look as I downed my second shot. "All right, man. What's going on?" he asked. I didn't hold back. I told him everything, the late nights, her sudden attachment to her phone, the photos, and the message from Marcus. Saying it all out loud made my blood boil. It made everything feel painfully real. When I was done, Dylan leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "Damn, man, that's rough. I don't even know what to say." I laughed, but it came out cold and bitter. "Yeah, join the club." Dylan's face hardened. You've got to leave her, Ethan. She's not worth it. If she's pulling this crap on you now, she'll just do it again. Cut your losses. File for divorce, and get the hell out. Dylan was right. He should have been right. But it didn't feel that simple. Walking away felt like letting her off the hook. Like she'd get to skate by unscathed. And that wasn't enough. Not after everything she'd put me through. I wanted her to feel the same kind of pain she'd caused me. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. I'm not walking away from this. Not yet. Dylan raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I want her to feel the same humiliation she made me feel, I muttered, almost more to myself than to him. He gave me a cautious look. What's that supposed to mean, Ethan? I leaned in, lowering my voice. Nicole Carter. Dylan's eyes went wide, and then he let out a laugh. Nicole? You serious? Man, Ella hates her. Exactly. Nicole had always been a thorn in Ella's side. She and Ella used to be close friends, but there was always this tension between Nicole and me. We never acted on it, but Ella sensed the chemistry. Nicole had this playful, flirty way about her that drove Ella up the wall. Ella and I had clashed over Nicole more times than I could count, even though nothing had ever happened between us. But now something was going to happen, and it was going to drive Ella up the wall. You know, Nicole's always had a thing for you, Dylan said, shaking his head with a knowing grin. This is going to get messy. That's exactly the point, I replied, my voice dark. Messy was what she deserved. Dylan shot me a skeptical look, but he didn't argue. Just be careful, man. This kind of stuff rarely ends well. That night, after I got back from the bar, I lay in bed beside Ella, staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly next to me. I felt like a stranger in my own life. Part of me wanted to wake her up right then and there, shove the pictures in her face, and demand some kind of explanation. But deep down, I knew there was nothing she could say that would make any of this right. So I started planning. I knew exactly how I'd go about this. Nicole had always made her interest in me clear, even if it was never anything blatant. A flirty comment here and there, a lingering touch, that playful, knowing smile she'd flash me when Ella wasn't watching. Ella hated it, and for years I'd pushed Nicole away out of respect for my marriage. But now I was done being the good guy. I pulled out my phone, opened Nicole's contact, and hesitated for a moment. This wasn't like me. I wasn't the type to use people as pawns in some revenge game. But Ella had changed me, turned me into someone I barely recognized. And if this was who I had to be to make her feel a fraction of what I felt, then so be it. I typed out a quick message. Hey, it's been a while. We should catch up sometime. I stared at the screen for a second, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I pressed send. The message delivered instantly. I knew Nicole would respond. She always did. And when she did, Ella was going to wish she'd never crossed me. It took less than an hour for Nicole's reply to come in. Of course, it did. She'd always been quick to respond, especially to me. Hey, stranger. Long time no see. I'd love to catch up. Coffee sometime? I smirked at the screen. It was almost too easy. Nicole had always been just a little too eager, always ready with that sly smile or a lingering look. Ella had picked up on it early on and hated Nicole for it. But I'd always brushed it off, played it cool. Now, though, I was about to dive straight into the exact scenario Ella had feared all along. We met at a cozy little coffee shop downtown. The kind with exposed brick walls and overpriced lattes that draw in people looking for more atmosphere than caffeine. I spotted Nicole before she noticed me. She had her long blonde hair down, paired with tight jeans and a low-cut blouse, not exactly subtle. She knew how to make an entrance. Ethan, she called out, her face lighting up as I approached. She pulled me into a hug that lingered just a beat too long, her perfume filling the air between us with a sweet, musky scent. Nicole, I greeted her with a smile. You look amazing, she laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear in that familiar, flirty way. Oh, stop. You haven't changed a bit. Conversation came easily, flowing from old memories to shared inside jokes. Nicole had this habit of leaning in just a little too close, touching my arm at every chance. This time, I didn't shy away. In fact, I played right into it, complimenting her laugh, her smile, the way she hadn't lost that familiar spark. She soaked up every word. We ended up staying over an hour, and by the time we left, I could tell I'd ignited a spark. More like a small fire. As we said goodbye, Nicole hugged me again, her lips brushing my cheek as she whispered, "We should do this again soon." Walking back to my car, I knew she was hooked. The game was on. A few days later, I sent her a text. "How about dinner? My treat. I know a spot you'll love." She agreed without a second thought, and that's when I knew she was right where I wanted her. Ella's best friend was practically begging for my attention, and for now I was all too willing to give it. We met at a swanky restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and a wine list longer than the actual menu. Nicole showed up fashionably late, wearing a fitted black dress that hugged every curve. "You clean up nice," I teased as she slid into the seat across from me. She grinned. "You don't look too bad yourself." Dinner felt like a slow, seductive dance. This time, Nicole's flirtation was less playful and more deliberate. She leaned in close when she spoke, letting her hand brush against mine whenever she reached for her wine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I mirrored her moves, locking eyes, smiling at the perfect moments, letting the tension between us build like a slow burn. Midway through the meal, Nicole leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a low, intimate whisper. "You know, Ethan, I've always had a thing for you." Feigning surprise, I raised an eyebrow. "Really? I had no idea." "Oh, come on," she teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You had to have known," Nicole said, her voice soft and coaxing. "Ella never treated you like she should have. Honestly, I always thought she took you for granted." I took a slow sip of my wine, letting her words linger in the air between us. "You might be right about that," I replied, watching her expression shift. Nicole smiled, sliding her hand over mine. "I mean it, Ethan. You're amazing. Any woman would be lucky to have you." I chuckled, shaking my head lightly. "If only you'd told me that sooner." Her eyes widened just a bit, a hopeful spark flashing across her face. The kind of spark that often leads people to make reckless decisions. Meanwhile, back at home, Ella had begun to notice the change in me. I could see it in the way she'd watch me, in the questions she'd ask, probing into how my day went, trying to read between the lines. "You seem different lately," she said one night, her voice cautious. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," I answered casually. "Why wouldn't it be?" She frowned, her eyes narrowing. "I don't know. You just seem distant." I shrugged. "Maybe I'm just tired." It was a weak excuse, but it was enough to keep her off my trail for now. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed to keep things under wraps until I was sure my plan was ready to unfold. The more I pulled away, the more suspicious Ella became. I could see it in the way she watched me, the pointed questions that grew sharper each day. "Where were you tonight?" she asked one evening when I came home later than usual. "With Dylan," I said smoothly. "You know how he is. One beer turns into 5. She didn't look convinced, but what could she say? After all, she was the one sneaking around with Marcus. If she wanted to accuse me of anything, she'd have to confront her own guilt first. I made sure to keep things vague enough to keep her guessing. Nothing too obvious, just enough to stoke her suspicions. It was a delicate balance, but I was starting to get the hang of it. The goal was to make her feel exactly what I had felt. Confused, paranoid, and always second-guessing. Every time she glanced at her phone or raised an eyebrow at one of my ambiguous answers, I felt a twisted satisfaction. It wasn't nearly enough to make us even, not yet, but it was a start. And as for Nicole, she was all in. The dinner had gone perfectly, and by the end of the night, she made it clear she was ready for more. As we said goodnight, she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, lingering just enough to make her intentions crystal clear. Her lips lingered on my cheek, just a beat too long. "Call me," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I smiled. "Count on it." Driving home that night, I felt a twisted sense of triumph building inside me. Ella had no clue what was coming, and Nicole was falling deeper into my plan with each passing day. Everything was set. All I had to do was stick to my part and wait for the right moment to watch it all unravel. Our wedding anniversary arrived faster than I'd expected. It was supposed to be a celebration of love, wasn't it? 5 years together, 3 of them married. Instead, I was orchestrating an elaborate display of betrayal and humiliation. The irony didn't escape me. Ella had chosen her path with Marcus, and tonight, she was going to see just how far she'd strayed. I pulled out all the stops. I booked a beautiful countryside villa, an elegant estate with ivy-draped walls, crystal chandeliers, and a garden that looked like something straight out of a fairy tale. We invited everyone, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and naturally Marcus. I made sure his invitation was front and center. My goal wasn't just to hurt Ella. It was to ensure she had a full audience for the grand reveal. That morning, Ella seemed genuinely excited, more animated than I'd seen her in months, which somehow only made my anger burn hotter. Her enthusiasm wasn't for me. It was for the show we'd be putting on for everyone else. She floated around the house, humming while she got ready, completely unaware that I, too, was looking forward to the evening, though for entirely different reasons. As evening fell, the villa was bustling with guests. I greeted everyone with a smile, playing the role of the doting husband perfectly. Ella looked stunning in her dress, that same red one she wore with Marcus. I couldn't decide if she'd picked it out of guilt or sheer arrogance, but either way, it only strengthened my resolve. Throughout the night, I stayed close to her, placing my hand on the small of her back, leaning in to whisper sweet words in her ear. She glowed under the attention, soaking up every compliment from our friends about how lucky we were, how strong our relationship seemed. I nodded along, swallowing every truth I wanted to throw in their faces. And, of course, Nicole was there too. Nicole looked stunning and dangerous in a sleek black dress, smirking at me from across the room. I gave her a subtle nod. She knew exactly what to do and precisely when. Marcus, on the other hand, arrived fashionably late, just as I'd hoped. I was mid-conversation with a few of Ella's coworkers when I noticed her stiffen slightly, her gaze flickering to the entrance. There he was, striding in like he owned the place, wearing that familiar smug smile I recognized from the photos. The shift in Ella was immediate. She lit up, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. It was as if she'd suddenly come to life after a long hibernation. In that moment, I had all the confirmation I needed. Any lingering doubt disappeared. There was no imagining this. I clenched my jaw but forced myself to keep it together. No outbursts, no scenes. Not yet. I had a script to follow, and I intended to see it through. I made sure to greet Marcus warmly, clapping him on the shoulder and handing him a drink. Ella watched us, her smile strained, her gaze nervous. She had no idea just how much I knew. As the night wore on and guests slowly trickled out, I slipped away from the party. I knew Ella would notice. I could practically feel her watching as I excused myself and slipped up the grand staircase to the second floor. That was her signal. Before long, she'd come searching, but by then, it would be too late. Nicole was already waiting in the room, leaning casually against the bedpost with that familiar mischievous grin. "You sure about this?" she asked, though we both knew she had no intention of stopping me. "More than sure," I muttered, closing the door behind me. She didn't need any more convincing. Within minutes, we were tangled in the sheets, her hands roaming, her breath hot against my neck. It was wild, raw, nothing like what I'd shared with Ella. But it wasn't about the passion. This was about the plan, the reckoning that was about to unfold. Right on cue, the door swung open. Ella stood in the doorway, frozen, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to absolute devastation. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Nicole, unfazed, sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around herself like a victory banner. "Well," Nicole said with a smirk, "now you know how it feels to be betrayed." I watched Ella, waiting for the inevitable explosion. But she didn't yell, didn't cry. She just stood there, pale and silent, her knuckles white as she gripped the doorknob. I could see it all clicking into place in her mind. The realization not only that I'd caught her cheating, but that I'd gone a step further, humiliating her in front of the one person she despised most. "You?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're disgusting." I sat up, perfectly calm, and gave her the same casual smile she'd given me so many times before, back when she thought I was in the dark. "Now we're even, Ella." She glared at me, her chest heaving with rage and betrayal. And for the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when she'd feel exactly what it was like to have her world pulled out from under her. Downstairs, the party continued, oblivious to the turmoil that had erupted upstairs. But I knew that wouldn't last. Soon, she'd run back down, and the whispers would begin to spread. The humiliation would set in, just like it had for me when I saw those photos of her and Marcus. Ella took a step back from the doorway, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're disgusting," she spat, her voice filled with venom. I shrugged, unbothered. "Takes one to know one." And with that, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Nicole chuckled softly beside me, lighting a cigarette as if this were the most natural situation in the world. "Well, that was fun," she said, blowing a trail of smoke toward the ceiling. I didn't reply. I lay back on the bed, staring up, listening to the distant sounds of laughter and music from downstairs. The plan had gone off without a hitch. I'd gotten my revenge. But as I lay there, the satisfaction I'd been expecting never came. Instead, there was just a hollow emptiness where my anger used to be. I'd won, sure, but at what cost? What had I really gained? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nicole leaned over, smirking. "You know, it won't be long before everyone knows the full story, right?" I nodded. That was part of the plan. Ella wasn't just going to lose me. She was about to lose everything. Her friends, her dignity, her carefully crafted social image. By the time we made our way downstairs, the whispers had reached a full hum. People cast glances our way, some curious, others barely hiding their amusement. The truth was spreading like wildfire. Ella's affair with Marcus, my revenge with Nicole. It was all out in the open, impossible to cover up or put back together. Nicole, never one to miss a dramatic opportunity, moved quickly. As soon as Ella reappeared, still disheveled and red-eyed, Nicole stepped forward, all smiles. "Ella," she said sweetly, though the venom was unmistakable in her voice, "I think it's time we clear the air. Don't you?" Ella glared at her, jaw clenched tight. "You're not doing this here." "Oh, but I think I am," Nicole replied, her smile widening. "You betrayed me. And you betrayed Ethan. Hell, you even betrayed yourself," Nicole continued, her voice cutting through the silence. "And everyone here deserves to see the kind of person you really are." The room went utterly silent. Ella looked like she wanted to disappear, but Nicole showed no mercy. Her words were sharp and ruthless. "Let's be real, Ella," Nicole sneered. "You threw away your marriage for some loser who can't even show up on time." She tilted her head mockingly. "What was your plan? Keep sneaking around with Marcus until Ethan finally caught you? Or did you actually think you'd get away with it forever?" Ella's eyes darted around the room, desperate, searching for someone, anyone, to come to her defense. But the faces that stared back were cold, judgmental. She was completely alone. Nicole turned to the crowd, addressing them as if she were delivering her final blow. "I'm done being friends with a backstabbing liar," she declared. "So, Ella, consider our friendship over." Ella's face crumbled, her mouth opening as if to respond, but no words came out. Nicole didn't wait for an answer. With a final smirk, she turned and sauntered away, leaving Ella exposed, humiliated, standing alone in the center of the room. And just like that, the social circle Ella had spent years carefully cultivating began to unravel. It was like watching a house of cards come crashing down, piece by piece. People whispered behind her back, offering tight, insincere smiles. Friends she'd once trusted distanced themselves, unwilling to get caught in the fallout. And Marcus? He disappeared the moment things started to get messy, just as I'd expected. By the time Ella's life began to truly collapse, he was already pulling away, trying to protect his own reputation. Rumors quickly spread at her workplace as well. Ella had always been the rising star, the one everyone respected. But now she was just the woman who'd wrecked her marriage for an affair with a coworker. The whispers followed her into meetings, trailing her through every interaction at the office. Her once flawless professional image was now irreparably stained. First, Ella tried to fight back. She tried to explain, tried to defend herself. But no one wanted to hear her side. Marcus stayed silent, unwilling to support her, and without him, she had nothing to stand on. She was left alone to face the full weight of her actions. I watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. For a while, it felt satisfying to see her lose everything, knowing she was finally getting what she deserved. But as the days passed, that satisfaction began to fade. The anger that had once fueled me, the rage that had driven my every move, it started to fade. That anger, that sense of triumph, leaving behind only a hollow ache. Sure, I'd won the game, but at what cost? Ella was shattered, isolated, disgraced, abandoned by the very people she'd once counted on. And as for me, I wasn't any better. I had destroyed her, yes, but in doing so, I'd somehow lost myself too. In those early days, watching her world crumble brought a grim satisfaction. Felt like justice, the justice I'd imagined over and over. I saw her stumbling through the wreckage of her life like a ghost. There were no more late-night meetings, no more hidden texts. Her friends, our friends, treated her like she was contagious. And at work, the respect she once commanded had evaporated, replaced by whispers and sideways glances. Marcus had vanished entirely, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone. For the first few days, I felt triumphant. Every time I saw her drifting around the house, broken, I reminded myself of those photos, of Marcus's messages, of all the lies she'd fed me with that easy smile. I didn't offer comfort when I heard her crying softly in the bathroom at night. I didn't feel pity. I felt justified. But as days turned into weeks, that sense of victory started to give way to something else. At first, it was hard to place, just a dull, persistent ache that settled in. I'd find myself sitting alone in the quiet house, thinking about the life we'd once shared, back when things felt good, or at least when I thought they were good. It was like a movie reel playing in my mind. Lazy mornings in bed, her laughter filling the room. Those early dates when everything felt fresh and new. I kept recalling the way she'd looked at me once, like I was her whole world. No matter how much I tried to shove those memories aside, they resurfaced, uninvited and unwelcome. One night, Dylan called. He'd been my biggest cheerleader throughout the whole ordeal, always quick to remind me that Ella was getting what she deserved. "Let's hit the bar," he said. "One more night to celebrate. You earned it, man." I went, hoping the noise and drinks would drown out the emptiness that had started creeping in. The bar was loud, packed with people laughing and shouting over the music. Dylan slapped me on the back, ordering shots like we were celebrating a promotion. "To freedom!" he shouted, raising his glass. "To being done with your cheating ex-wife." I forced a smile and clinked glasses with him, downing the shot. The burn of the alcohol didn't bring the relief I was looking for. The victory felt hollow, the celebration meaningless. Dylan kept talking, his words blurring together in the background. I just sat there, nursing my drink, feeling more disconnected than ever. At some point, Dylan leaned in with a grin. "What's up, man? You should be on top of the world right now." I shrugged, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "I don't know, Dylan. It doesn't feel the way I thought it would." He looked at me, puzzled. "What more do you want, Ethan? You got your revenge. You're free now." Free. The word sounded foreign. Ella was out of my life, her betrayal exposed, her reputation in tatters. But instead of feeling free, I felt lost. Somewhere in all the anger and scheming, I'd lost more than just her. I'd lost myself. After another drink, I muttered an excuse, left Dylan at the bar, and headed home, driving through the darkened streets in silence, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The house felt eerily quiet when I walked in, too quiet. I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. I found myself scrolling through old photos, vacations, birthdays, random moments we'd captured during nights in. One photo stopped me. Our first anniversary, sitting on a beach, grinning like fools. I remembered the happiness I'd felt that day, convinced she was the one I'd spend my life with. I'd believed in us, in love, in the future we were going to build together. And now I wasn't sure if I believed in any of it anymore. I stared at those photos, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost. Not just Ella, but the version of myself that existed before all this. The man who believed in love, who thought trust was unbreakable, who wanted nothing more than to make his wife happy. That man was gone. In his place was someone I barely recognized. Someone bitter, hollow, and exhausted. The silence of the house wrapped around me, heavy and suffocating. I took a long sip of my beer and sank back into the couch, letting the memories flood over me. I thought revenge would bring peace, that if I could make her feel the way I'd felt, betrayed, humiliated, then everything would be okay. But the truth was, revenge hadn't healed anything. It had only traded one kind of pain for another, deeper kind. Ella was gone, her life in shambles, but instead of feeling victorious, I felt empty. I sat there for what seemed like hours, lost in the flickering glow of the TV I'd left on. The beer growing warm in my hand, scrolling through the photos on my phone without really seeing them. I realized then that there would be no closure, no clean end to this story. Just a broken marriage, shattered trust, and the bitter truth that some wounds don't heal. They only leave scars that linger. I'd won, but the victory was hollow. Peace was nowhere in sight. The man I used to be, the man who believed in love, was gone for good. All that was left was the empty house, the faint hum of memories, and me, sitting alone in the ruins of a life I thought I understood. For the first time since this whole mess began, I understood the true cost of revenge. I hadn't just lost Ella. I'd lost myself.